And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, I'm Tom Vasel, and today we're taking a look at an expansion highly anticipated for one of my favorite games, Caverna. Now we have Caverna, the Cave Farmers, the Forgotten Folk. So apparently the dwarves forgot other races existed. No shocker there. But in this game, you don't have to play as the dwarves. You can play as the humans or the silicoids or some other race, which is going to give you both special abilities and a disadvantage. It also adds some more buildings and a few new resources. Let's take a look. So in this game, you can play as the dwarves, or you can pick one of the new races. If you pick a new race, let's say I pick the humans here, for example, you will also take all the buildings, so there's 4 buildings that come with the humans, and you'll replace them. So this replaces the ruby supplier, the blacksmithing power, the milking power, the weapon storage. So you'll find those buildings and replace them with these buildings. So these buildings are just various different things that sometimes will replicate the abilities that the humans have, or might even make their abilities better, or just give people, like for example, the manure heap. This gives you points for each adjacent pasture, 1 point for each adjacent pasture, and it also immediately gives you 2 vegetables. Is that worth it? I think so. Here, for each adjacent animal, you immediately breed an animal. So let's take a look at the different ones. I'm not going to go over every building that comes with these, although there's all different sorts of buildings for each of the different races. So we'll start with the humans. So first of all, the humans here, they really don't like going into the caves. They're all about the fields. In fact, they can overhang tiles off the fields, and if they do so, you get money and food. And whenever you put tiles into the cave, you are restricted by actually placing only singles instead of doubles. And this set comes with more of these in case you need them. At the end of the game, though, you do not lose points for having empty spaces in your cave. The elves are also like this, where they also like the fields. In fact, they can plant stuff and put animals directly onto the forest. You don't have to put stuff. You can plant the different things in there, but you don't get the bonuses. However, they can't build in the caves at all unless they pay rubies, which is very expensive. And they don't lose points at all for any empty spaces on their board. The pale ones, these guys are the opposite. They like the mining area. And so they can even go to these mining spots even when someone else is there. They can overhang, which gives them a mushroom and a point. Speaking of mushrooms, mushrooms are included in this game. And mushrooms at any point, you can turn a mushroom in for 2 food or 1 vegetable. And mushrooms can be sown into empty cave spots. You put a mushroom and you add 1. You got to be careful though. The only way to get mushrooms is by the pale ones putting them over, or there's a couple buildings that will give you mushrooms. And at the end of the game, mushrooms are worth a point. However, the pale ones don't like to go out, so whenever they're going to put out a double tile outside in the fields, they also have to put only a single tile, but they don't lose points for forest tiles that are not uncovered. The mountain dwarves also don't like to go out in the fields. So these guys can overhang tiles also. It gives them 2 gold. And whenever they need something that pays with wood, they can pay with stone and ore instead. But when they put things out in nature, they have to put out a single tile, and they don't. The mountain dwarves and the pale ones are very similar. Trolls. So trolls have one of the coolest special abilities. Whenever they go on an adventure, they get to go on an extra one. That's awesome. But they need to pay 3 food per person at the end of each feeding phase. They also can pay 2 wood. They start with a 4 weapon when they go on adventures, and the highest adventure they can go to is 10. Good news though, they can eat dogs, sheep, and donkeys for 2 food. As far as you can tell, the only people who can eat dogs. And in fact, one of the buildings for them, which I wanted to point out because I just think it's fun, well, not one of them, but one of the people, if you're playing with them, they have the ability to, dogs have the ability to breed. If they're in the game, that's really good for the trolls. Dark elves have goblins, so they can put goblins out when they go on an adventure of 10 or level. So there's different goblins that come with the game now. And goblins have a lot of negative things about them. Goblins are lazy. They go in order of weapon strength after everyone else has gone, so they have to be the last people to go. When they get goods from a space, you have to put 1 back. And they're incompetent when they make weapons. The weapons are 2 less. However, they're cheap and easy to get. The Dark Elves also get rubies for placing the ruby mines, which is awesome, but they don't score for dwellings. The cave goblins themselves are goblins. They come with all these negative things of goblins, but they can go up to 6, and they start with 3, which is a pretty neat starting ability. You just have the negative things about the goblins. And finally, the silicoids. The silicoids here eat only rock, and in each feeding phase, they require 1 stone each. So they eat rock no matter what, and you get discounts of rock. So you can always buy a rock with gold once per turn, or you can pay 3 food twice to get a gold and then do that. So you basically turn 3 food into a rock. So the silicoids are interesting to work with because it sounds cool that they can only eat rock, but then you'll find that you want to do other things with that rock and you're not able to. I should also mention one of the races has the gem fruits. These are another thing that are included with the game. Gem fruits are planted out in fields, and you put one, you can put another one on top of it. There's a few races and buildings that give you these. They can be turned in for 2 food or a ruby at any point, and they're worth a point at the end of the game. That's basically what's in this game. So the game comes with all the different, the new resources, the gems and the mushrooms, and I'm going to have to find some sort of way to see if I can upgrade these, but they look pretty cool as it is. I like that the new buildings will show which character race they are on the back, and then it tells you what they replace. Although replacing them is going to be a bit of work, so you're going to have to move to do that. But I like the new buildings. They're going to change things up. Your dogs can watch double the number of sheep, or here you immediately will get 2 of these gem fruits here, which is one of the only ways to do them, by getting the Mystic's Hut. And so there's a lot of different buildings. The game also comes with 3 different reference boards. You got one for gem fruits, mushrooms, and goblins. There's not a lot of them, but only so many players can have them. These work pretty well, the boards. They show you symbology of what they do, or you can just use the straight up text. I just use the symbology because it's easy to remember, and then if you need help, you can flip it over and do it. The rule book itself is pretty clear about how everything works, and it also explains how each of the buildings work if you don't remember or want more explanation on how the buildings are. The game also comes with some extra coins and, single tiles, since you're going to need them. I do not think the expansion will fit easily in the base box, since my base box is already bursting at the seams. What can you do? So that's what's in the box here. This is kind of interesting to me how this plays out, because at first I was like, oh wow, special abilities, and then you're like, oh my, I have to deal with this negative thing too. So let's say you're the trolls. You're like, yeah, I get to go on more adventures, but oh, I have to pay extra food. I better get on this getting some food thing. Oh, but I can eat dogs. So should I take more dogs? So it just changes how you play considerably, but not just in advantages, but in the disadvantages too. To the point where if you play the dwarves, you do not feel any disadvantage at all. And in fact, the dwarves gives you freedom. So this is kind of one of the few expansions that I would actually play with people who are first new to Caverna. And that's kind of a weird thing, right? If you're new to Caverna, I would recommend this. It reminds me very much of the Leaders expansion for Seven Wonders. It has a similar thing. When you play one of these races, it gives you very specific things. You should do this. Like, oh, you're the pale folk. You should build in your cavern and not do harvesting. See, when you play Caverna first time, you're like, ooh, I can do whatever I want. This is kind of like, yeah, no, you can't. You should focus on this. That being said, when you pick the races for the game, I found that the balance can be thrown off a little bit. If like you pick 2 people who are good, the deep dwarves and the pale folk, and both of them are fighting over building in the caverns down below, while someone else is, doing the outside stuff as a third player. I think I would watch that, and maybe not, if 2 people picked similar races, maybe look for a better spread because they're going to crisscross each other. But it's interesting because when I played this, I felt almost a little restricted as I went through, like, oh man, I can't do everything I want to do in Caverna. So I would play with this often with Caverna. I would be like, oh sure, I'm going to play as the silicoids. Okay, how do I get rock? How do I do that? And you know what, today I'm going to just play the dwarves and be normal. The mushrooms and the gem fruits and the goblins are interesting things to add in. And I do like a lot the new buildings because it just kind of changes things up. You look at the buildings and say, oh, let's say you're playing 4 players, 4 new races, that's 16 to 20 new buildings on the board. Oh, wow. Even if only one person's playing, there's still some new buildings for you to look at. So it adds buildings in a variety, but then doesn't add buildings, it's replacing them. So that kind of changes the game up too. So it does add a lot of variety. It's going to give you a lot more things you can do. I would certainly not say it's essential to the game. If I never played with it, I'd be perfectly fine, but I did enjoy it a lot. And I think it was actually a cool way to teach new people to play the game because you gave them a very specific focus, like, hey, you're going to go out and plant. That's your thing. Or you're going to, some of them are more newbie friendly than not, but overall it's pretty good. I wish there was a way to combine all the stuff in one big box, but it is what it is. But it's a neat expansion. I think Caverna was a game that didn't necessarily, I wanted more buildings and stuff, so I got them in here. I think I'm pretty happy with where Caverna is at this point in time. So this is kind of an expansion I would play with maybe half the time. That's The Forgotten Folk. Dice Tower Judgment, approved!